It's so often I have clients that they've gone in to see their doctor with concerns of heartburn and indigestion, but the only thing they end up leaving with is a lifetime prescription of medication.
Introducing the Perimena Bliss Podcast, a show dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of achieving optimal health naturally as you transition into perimenopause and menopause. Get ready to join your host, Dr. Seth Yates, an experienced naturopathic doctor, acupuncturist, and kinesiologist, as he shares his wealth of knowledge acquired from over 40,000 patient visits and 15 years in working with perimenopausal females. Welcome to the Perimena Bliss Podcast.
Hey, this is Doc Yates. Welcome to the Perimena Bliss Podcast, brought to you by PerimenaBliss.com. And today I want to talk about heartburn and indigestion and 4 simple things that you can do to correct this so that you don't end up on a lifetime prescription of PPIs. Those medications are only supposed to be prescribed for 2 weeks, but the problem is because they don't tell you anything about how to actually fix the underlying problem. If you're not fixing the underlying problem and you're only using the medication as a Band-Aid, you're never going to get off that Band-Aid. And it becomes a lifelong Band-Aid with a lot of side effects and risk factors down the road. So today I want to teach you 4 simple things that you can do to fix your heartburn and indigestion and get feeling better right away. So let's dive into that, because I've been working with clients with diet, nutrition, and studying traditional diets and cultures for close to 15 years at this point. And what I have found is that there is a lot of overlap with traditional I don't even want to say necessarily diet, but diet routines, like meal routines. And it's these meal routines that's just as important as what you're eating. And we're going to discuss both. So I'm breaking it down in terms of what do you do before you eat, what do you do during your meal, and what do you do after. And by addressing these things, you will see an improvement. Or everyone always seems to. I guess you can't, there's no guarantees in medicine, so I'm not making any guarantees with the podcast. But always, so far, people have felt better doing this. So let's dive into it. Number 1, if you're dealing with heartburn and indigestion, what you do before the meal is important. Now this, keep in mind, I'm tying this more into, because it's for Perimena Bliss, I'm talking to adults right now that are 40 plus. Adults that are 40 plus. And what happens a lot of times is indigestion gets worse with age, is that as you're aging, your digestion gets weaker. So a lot of times when people end up going to the health food store, they get a bunch of what's called digestive enzymes. And the digestive enzymes work hopefully to help your body's own enzymes, because you're just adding more enzymes to the process. While I'm not opposed to digestive enzymes, I have a preferred treatment that I like to use, and that's called bitters. Bitters are herbs that instead of giving you enzymes, they help your body secrete more of its own enzymes. And the side benefit of bitters is that most bitters also have an antimicrobial effect, which means that if there's any type of overgrowth of yeast in your digestive tract, any type of SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, these same herbs, besides stimulating your digestion, can help kill off problematic bacteria. This is why it works so well. The only downside of bitters is that it's bitter. And you can't just hide the flavor. You can't just mix it with something like a ton of juice. The bitter flavor is part of the treatment. They use the term bitter in the mouth, sweet in the stomach. That's a very old herbalist term. And what that means is that things that are bitter in your mouth, they know that it makes your stomach feel better, because that bitter flavor, the moment it touches your tongue, as you start stimulating the digestive enzymes and digestive juices flowing. So get bitters. And the only other thing I would say before a meal is try and relax when you eat. Eating on the go, eating on the road, constantly doing something else while eating is not helping a weak digestive system. And now, again, since I'm addressing my 40-plus crowd, your digestive system will get weaker with age. And anything, especially if you're getting these symptoms later on, take some time, relax, sit down, and eat. Take some bitters before. Now, number 2, what to do during a meal if you're suffering with heartburn and indigestion. So the first part of this is we want to talk about what you're eating. what you're eating will play a big role. And I would say, without trying to overcomplicate things, if for most people, if you can just focus on the big hitters, that's often enough. And I'm talking about the things that are considered really acidic on the stomach. So, tomato sauces, citrus, spicy foods, and coffee. Coffee. If you have problems with heartburn and you're drinking more than a cup of coffee a day, that's got to be one of the first things we get you to do, is pull back the coffee to a absolute max of 1 cup per day. We're going to replace your coffee with some herbal tea, and we're going to discuss that in point number 3. So the main thing is cut out these more acidic, irritating foods. If that's not enough, excuse me. If that's not enough, then a lot of times there's too much processed foods. And some of the more processed foods that I've found that people have reactions to, a lot of grains like wheat, corn. I would say most people, if they cut out wheat, corn, and dairy above and beyond those other foods, that's almost always all you need to do. If there's any other food allergies that you have, of course, you leave those out. But acidic foods, like I said, tomatoes, citrus, coffee, and then if you need to go above and beyond, you would pull out wheat, corn, and dairy. Once things get better, you start putting those back in at one at a time. The only other thing I would say is that if you have a lot of bloating and you're also prone to a lot of loose stool, the other suggestion that I commonly have people do is, again, this is tying back to your digestive system's getting weaker. Certain foods are harder to digest. We want the digestion to be as easy as possible initially while you're recovering. So I have people pull back on raw foods. A lot of times people are like, oh, I'm on this health kick, so I'm going to eat all this raw broccoli and I'm going to eat all these salads. And it only makes their digestion worse. In those situations, you need to pull the raw food out if you're getting heartburn with bloating, and especially if there's loose stool. If that's the case, pull back on the raw food. Number 3, what are you going to do now after a meal? Because you're not having any more coffee. I know that for sure. This is the time where you have what we call the soothing sweet. Now, traditionally, a lot of cultures would have something sweet after a meal, but a lot of the times it wasn't sugar, it was sweet herbs. So even if you go, say, to like an Indian restaurant, after the meal when you're leaving, they have this little dish of fennel seeds sitting there, which have like a sweet licoricey kind of flavor, and it's really soothing for your digestive tract. Using these types of things helps soothe your digestion. No different than European culture. Before the meals, they would have a drink like a bitters. Like, for instance, even Jaeger is originally a bitters. These are all things to stimulate digestion. And then after the meal, they would have a sweeter drink, often something, say, like Zambuca, which is made from anise, which is literally the Egyptian translation for the word anise is comforter of the bowels. Okay, so their entire culture, even when they were drinking alcohol, was based around improving their digestion. So I want you to keep that in mind. So what we want you to do is, rather than taking shots of Zambuca after every meal, because that's not going to go over well, is we're going to use sweet herbs in a tea. So we have a formula that I've put together called Digestion Enhanced, but I'll tell you the ingredients. The main ingredients for this is anise, licorice root, and something called meadowsweet. Those are the main ingredients. Anise, licorice root, meadowsweet. These are all things that are anti-inflammatory for the digestive tract. They reduce excess acid, and they soothe your stomach and relieve any kind of cramping or indigestion. So let's review. Before the meal, you're going to relax and have bitters. During the meal, you're going to cut out these problematic foods that we talked about. After the meal, you have a cup of this soothing sweet tea, the Digestion Enhanced. Now, there's one last thing if this is not enough, and this is something that I do for clients on a regular basis, and it usually only takes a few seconds, but you do have to have someone who's done this before. Point number 4, if you're dealing with heartburn and indigestion, the position of your stomach can play a huge role. And there are times when I've made the adjustment to someone's stomach and they didn't have to do any of these other changes. That was it. I just made the adjustment to their stomach, and they didn't have to make any diet changes. They didn't use any bitters. They didn't take any teas. Though it probably would have been better for them overall if they did. They didn't need to. So, your esophagus, so think about it, food goes in your mouth, goes down your esophagus. Your esophagus has to travel through your diaphragm first, and then your stomach is sitting there underneath the diaphragm. It's really common, I find, that the position of the stomach is slightly moved up through the diaphragm, and this has a role with the sphincter that closes the stomach and stops acid from basically coming back up. The sphincter is staying open, but it's because of the positioning of the stomach. This is what we would call a hiatus hernia, but it would be considered a very mild hiatus hernia. Because there's a lot of clients I've even seen that had a scope done, and it wasn't bad enough that it was seen on a scope. Keep in mind, it's hard to see on a scope when you're looking at the inside of the stomach to see what the position of the outside of the stomach is. It's a very simple procedure. In terms of finding someone locally for you to do this, I learned this technique from a chiropractor in Boston. So it's something that chiropractors know. So most chiropractors, I think, at least in the States, would know this. An osteopath, most osteopaths would know how to do this. What they would be doing is they'd be right underneath the angle of your rib cage, right where your stomach is. As you take a deep breath in, as you exhale, they're going to be pushing down into your stomach. And then as you complete the exhale, they're going to pull your stomach down towards your belly button. That's usually repeated 1 to 3 times. And then I will usually do a quick massage on the diaphragm itself. And you do that, generally you only ever need to do it like 4 times. So in terms of frequency, I always find that if you can do a few in a row, so I'll try and do it twice a week for 2 weeks. And that's usually it. Sometimes literally you just do it once and it's better. So if you have chronic digestive issues and you've already tried a lot of these other things, cut these foods out, you've tried bitters, etc., get your stomach adjusted. It makes a big difference. So that's everything. Now you might be thinking, that's a lot of stuff. You said it was going to be 4 simple things, and as long as you're okay with making a few changes, they can be very simple. Because let's break it down like this: you leave on your table your bitters. So for breakfast, don't bother taking it with you for lunch and every meal, because I don't want you to have to travel with it for work and everything. But for breakfast and for supper, you have a half teaspoon to a teaspoon of bitters to stimulate your digestion. After that meal, the easiest way to do is you make a full pot of this tea, and then you have a cup of it after breakfast. You have a cup, you warm it back up and have another cup after supper. Or if you're on the road a lot, you put it all in a thermos and you just drink it after each meal. From a food standpoint, if you want to focus on the big hitters first, coffee, tomato sauce, really acidic foods. That can be it. That can be the starting point. And if you happen to find a chiro or an osteopath in your area, pop in, get your stomach adjusted. It literally takes 30 seconds to do that maneuver. And then start feeling better and get off of the medications. I hope this was helpful. This is Doc Yates signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to the Paramena Bliss podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and visit paramenobliss.com for more valuable information on how you can thrive during your transition through perimenopause. Join our community of like-minded women who are dedicated to achieving optimal health naturally, and stay up to date with the latest tips, tricks, and advice from Dr. Seth Yates. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Paramena Bliss podcast.